Hello and welcome to our podcast, Pipeline to Profitability. I'm Alan Ferguson, and today I have a very special guest, Jim Klauck. And Jim, I have to say I owe a lot to, because Jim has actually helped me to get back into podcasting. And as an amateur, I want to I suppose, look at the expertise that Jim's providing. And I'll quickly introduce Jim, and I'm sure he'll want to add some more to this. But in a world where home service companies get lost in a sea of advertising and marketing options, Jim Klauck, the radio pitchman, offers simple methods which gets the phone to ring with qualified customers through direct response radio advertising. Since 2003, Jim has been assisting home service professionals build their businesses through direct response radio. Jim likes to say he's in the business of helping winners win more. From air conditioning companies to window replacement, Jim has worked with hundreds of home service companies over the last 20 years. Jim works with premier home service companies such as A1 Garage Door Service in Phoenix, Arizona, as well Abacus in Houston, Texas, where he has produced unique programming to get the phone to ring for premier home service companies. There is nothing more than Jim would rather do to help his clients grow their businesses through direct response radio. If you ask Jim, how's he going? He likes to say, living the dream. Well, welcome to the podcast, Jim.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate it, buddy. I am living the dream. How about you?
I am, actually. It's funny you ask, and yeah, everything is really falling into place for me, and yeah, I love it here in Texas. And thank you for the great lunch the other day at that amazing country club that you're part of.
Absolutely. I enjoyed your company, enjoyed our conversation, and I enjoy working with you on your podcast. This one that you actually are producing right now, I work with you on. So I get to see all of your guests, and it's kind of fun because I'm one of the guests now on the program I help produce. It's exciting.
I love it. And today I want to, I suppose, challenge not just you, but our listeners to how they can use the services that you provide via podcasting, via radio, on growing their businesses. I'm quite fascinated by this concept. Anything to do with marketing, because marketing is everything, and everything is marketing, right? So how can your average contractor, I work in the plumbing, electrical, air conditioning space. How can the average contractor grow their business by what you have to offer, Jim?
Sure. So I can help contractors, home service professionals. And by the way, I'm only willing to work with winning companies that want to win more. And if you don't know what that means, I'll quickly explain it. If you've been doing the same old thing for 30 years and you don't want to do anything new, and you're still at $800,000 a year of revenue, and you've been there for 20 years, then you're really not winning, right? I mean, so you can be a small company where you did 50,000 last year and 150 this year and projected to do 300 the next year. Even though you're smaller than the first company, you're still moving forward and winning. And I just don't like dealing with people and companies that are like, well, I've been doing this forever and I'm, happy where I am. I just want to help winners win more. And that's kind of my motto. So I say that I help contractors or home service professionals with podcasts. And it's really not a traditional podcast. It's kind of, it's quite different. So I use the term podcast because we use podcast platforms. We use Audible and Spotify and YouTube and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and Podchaser. You can go down the list. There's about 15 platforms that we put our home service professionals on. But these are only 3 to 5 minute bits. Now, I'm not sure if your listeners or your viewers have heard of Marcus Sheridan. I'm going to put this book up right now. It's called They Ask, You Answer. And I was able to have the honor of interviewing Marcus on one of my podcasts recently. And he wrote this book. He is in the pool business. And back in 2008, 2009, when the banking crisis happened, they had a number of customers that basically reneged on their deposit. They said, things are falling apart. We want our deposit back. And the pool company almost went out of business. Long story short, Marcus decided to try some things on his website, and the results were fantastic. And that is educating his customer, educating his prospect. So I want all the home service professionals to listen up very carefully. Here's what we do. We record 3 to 5 minute video podcasts, if you want to call them that, to educate your prospect and customer. And trust me, your competition isn't doing this. So if someone's going to a plumber's website and they're going to 3 to 5 of them, and they're basically browsing those sites because they want to get a new water heater. They've heard all kinds of great things about a tankless water heater. And they've got 2 15-year-old tank heaters, and they want out. So now they want to know who they should hire. Years ago, they'd go to the Yellow Pages or Google and, type in tankless water heater and see what came up and ask someone to come out for a quote. Well, what Marcus says in his book is people today, which I agree with, people today don't want to call you as a home service provider. They want to do research first. They want to be totally educated before they call you. Now, I'm going to put another book up because this is fun. It's like a book report. This book is written by a friend of mine who I helped blow up his business from an $800,000 a year installation business to $3 million in 12 months. And we did it with this process. This book is called When Can You Do It? I wrote the foreword of this book. That's exactly what you want the homeowner to ask when you go out on that sales call. You don't want them to ask, well, what are the benefits of the tank versus or tankless versus tank? How much does it cost? How long will it take to put in? You've already answered all the questions in a video, and they've seen you. They know who you are. They know the culture of the company. And that's what we do.
Fantastic. Yeah, I have seen some of the short videos that you've done for the likes of A1 and Abacus and a few. You work with quite a few companies, and it sort of reminds me there is a similarity to what we used to do quite a few years back with a we would record a video or a cartoon explainer of what our business does, and it was always, I learned from the successful contractors that were trying to grow their database, they'd ask for a customer's email. And instead of saying, look, we just want your email so we can spam you all the time, they would say, well, look, the reason we collect emails is so we can send you a tech bio. So prior to sending a technician to a customer's home, we'd have a little explainer video on how we work and talking about all the services we offer. So in a way, it's a simple, you could use this the same. You could do something similar. So I love what you're about, what you're doing, but I don't really appreciate you bringing your books out until I ask you about the books. No.
Sorry about that.
I leave a segment at the end saying,
remember,
right, what books are you reading? I'm still going to do that to you at the end. And you are going to bring another book out and show me. But I'd love to know what
I've got a library here.
I love to know what other successful people, what books they're actually reading. And I don't know if you use Audible or not, but I tend to listen to way more books than I read now, because reading sort of puts me to sleep. And so I try not to read while I'm driving. It's always good. So, yeah. So what are some of the other great ideas that you might like to offer our listeners on, maybe they're not quite ready to engage a podcast? I'd highly recommend it. Maybe you'd like to go into a little bit of, I suppose, further information on what else they can do.
I'll go into some detail on how it works. And by the way, can I put up another book or do you want me to wait? I'll wait.
No, I'm joking, mate.
I wanted, okay. So this book, So Alan and I both like to listen to Audible because we just don't want to sit there and read 150, 250 page book anymore. This is 50 pages and it's small. This can be read in 20 to 25 minutes. And we also have an Audible copy of this as well, theradiopitchman.com. Just go to theradiopitchman.com and you can actually, I'll listen to the book. But if you want a signed copy, you can get one. And I'm sure in the notes of this podcast, Alan will have my contact information. It's Jim at the Radio Pitchman. Jim at the Radio Pitchman. In any case, there you go. I'm a pitchman, right? So, Alan, you knew when you scheduled me that I might be pitching, right? It's in my name. That's what I do.
I didn't just know I could have accurately predicted it and put a bet on it that you would,
Yeah. So we make this
right.
Yeah. So we make this really easy for the home service provider, because a lot of people think, well, I don't know how to do a podcast. If you can do a Zoom call, it's done, because I do this type of thing with my home service clients. So you see me here, right? I'm doing this with Alan. Pretend you're Alan, but I'm the one that's actually doing the interview. So I know all the questions to ask. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I know everything about HVAC and roofing and foundations and like 50 different home service categories. And my job is to ask you frequently asked questions that the homeowner is wanting to ask you, but they don't want to pick up the phone anymore. I'm telling you, even I don't want to pick up the phone much. My wife never picks up the phone. If she can't schedule an appointment online, she probably doesn't schedule one. So people do a lot of research, and it's different than when we were younger, Alan, because people did pick up the yellow pages, and the guys who had the biggest ads or were at the top got most of the phone calls.
That's it. Just on, I'm thinking out loud here, which is always good. on a podcast. I have quite a few companies that are, let's just picture some of the companies I work with, big companies here in the US and Australia, that are air conditioning companies, and they've heard about how profitable drain clearing is, especially when anyone follows the process that I recommend. And that's pretty much what I'm doing now, is helping companies transition from air conditioning to plumbing to drain clearing, where the highest margins in the industry are hiding. So if I was let's say I'm an air conditioning company and I want to add a drain division, and I really want to promote my drain business to be number one, how would I go about, what suggestions would you make, Jim?
To make your drain clearing company the number one?
Number one in my particular market.
Oh my gosh. Well, that depends on a lot of things. Depends how big the market is. So if it's Houston, okay, of course.
Yeah, let's say it's Houston.
Okay, it's Houston. Well, of course, there's SEO. There's, of course, television, which is still big for the big guys. Radio is big. Billboards are still big. And I'm assuming that you're a big company, so you've got 342 trucks out there. And so they're all wrapped, right? And everyone's dressed well in a uniform. So the bigger you are, the easier it is.
You've mixed me up with another Alan in this market. Yeah.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. He's done a great job since 2003 building his plumbing, HVAC, and electrical business. And but when he started out, he was doing SEO. He actually joined our organization back in 2008, as a matter of fact. And so if you're a smaller company, and most of the companies that we deal with, honestly, are 800,000 to 5 million a year. All right. They're not these big Goliaths. They're not doing $150 million. And of course, SEO is huge. Google's important. A lot of these home service companies, Alan, tell me that if Google went down for a day, they would lose up to half of their leads. Half.
That's right. Not the companies that are working with me, because I'm part of my coaching is to wean contractors off the reliance on Google AdWords, and nothing wrong with that if you want to rapidly grow. But most companies that have been around for a little bit have more than enough leads within their business already. And maybe the podcast, if I was going to start up another service company in Houston, and that may be on the cards, I would definitely be utilizing your services and podcasts just to educate the customer on how to effectively get their drains flowing again, or whatever it is I'm trying to pitch.
Sure. I got a video from one of our newer home service professionals that signed up for our program. as far as doing these very short podcasts. And he's a home inspector in San Diego. He sends me this video last week and he says, now I'm paraphrasing, and he calls me Joe because that's what I call myself on the radio, Check a Pro Joe, and on the podcast. So he says, hey, Joe, I just want to tell you a story. Spoke to a prospective home buyer. He was a bit leery about hiring me because he's had a bad experience before with home inspectors. And so I talked him through some things. Then I sent him a link to it was Audible or Spotify podcast that we did together. And I closed the $1,500 deal.
Wow.
And that's 30 seconds. That's sweet. Of course I use that to pitch, right? Because I mean, that's a great testimonial. It's not a testimonial of how great I am, which is fine. It's how he uses the podcast. So we have SEO as well built in. So when we put the podcast on Audible and Spotify and Apple and Google, we put backlinks back to the home service provider's home page. All right. Like A1 Garage Door Service, they get backlinks coming back from all these places we put it on YouTube and so forth. So there's an SEO mix here. There's a credibility. There's an education. And right now, this thing is blowing up. So you've been around the block like I have. So you can remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, you had to have a fax machine. Remember those days?
Yep.
You had to have a fax machine. Okay. Before that, you had to have a phone number. Of course, that goes back to the 1920s probably. Anyway, phone number, fax machine. We all had to get email. Small businesses really back in 2003, 2005, 6 were getting websites for the first time, believe it or not. And then social media came in, Facebook, way before Instagram, and of course, a YouTube channel. Now, guess what people want? They want to be seen and heard through a podcast. It is the hottest thing right now.
I can imagine that. Like that's yeah. Look, I've been an advocate and a podcaster for 10 years now, and even though the Pipeline to Profitability podcast, which started around 2013, was about promoting our company in Australia, Service Professionals, it was there to educate other contractors on how to grow their business via marketing, via best practice. So I'm a massive believer in podcasting. I wish I hadn't have stopped, but I stopped for reasons because I had a few priorities came up that took me away from the Service Professionals, Service Nation down under. But now that I'm freed up from owning a service company, I'm back into podcasts. And my goal, and I find that if I share what I'm trying to achieve openly, it holds me to account. But yes, I do plan on having the #1 plumbing podcast on the planet, and that's my goal. And I'm a very determined individual, and when I decide to do something, I do it, and I just keep going till I achieve that goal. So, and that's a bit like, I mean, for me to say that, but I want to do that with you, Jim. I want you to help me to have the #1 podcast on the planet.
I appreciate the confidence you have in me, and I love being on your team. It's fun. And you know what's really interesting, and I want to tell your viewers this. I do have a small handful of, we'll call them coaches and trainers in home service, much like Alan. But that's really not my business. It's interesting. There was this byproduct I got because we travel in the same circles, right? So as I'm doing this stuff, Alan sees me, says, oh, well, this guy does podcasts and so forth. So I generally really help the home service provider like Alan does in his area. I do it in the podcast area. And I love doing what I'm doing for you. This is more of a long form or a long format type podcast, typical going back and forth. The podcasts we do for our clients are 3 to 5 minutes long. And it's like, what's the difference between a tank and tankless? Do I need a 3-ton or a 5-ton air conditioning system? Things like that. Should I change my filters weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually? And the answer would be, well, it depends. So, but people want answers to these questions. And that's why Marcus Sheridan's book is so important. They ask, you answer.
I love the fact that you've shared some great books, and I'm going to, towards the end of the podcast, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to get you to bring another book at me, which is great because most of the books, I wouldn't say all the books, most of the books that my guests have recommend. I've already touched on their book, and a couple of the books that you've already talked about, I've got copies behind me. Your little book, and I did click on your I went and had a listen. It's great. It's anyone that wants to learn more about podcasting and what Jim does, I highly recommend at least listening to his book on Audible. But so as far as ideas, anyone that follows me and is in my coaching programs that I offer, not just mine, Joe Cunningham, who is my business partner here in Houston. I want to be able to put something out there that helps contractors to promote themselves professionally. Now, for a drain company, and I'm just thinking an idea, anyone that's that wants to utilize your services might like to put together some educational promotion on why would I use a company that uses a trenchless repair method over having to chop up my driveway or my bathroom. I mean, that's a no-brainer. But that sort of thing, a lot of our homeowners and our clients have no idea what the difference is between a company that comes and chops and digs everything up versus one that doesn't. So I wanted to throw that's being, I suppose, obvious, but sometimes it's the obvious things that are the ones that we're not doing, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I want everyone who's listening, who's in home service, to really think about this. What separates you from the other guys? And I'll tell you what often people will say. Well, we have, 1,400 5-star reviews on Google. We've been in business for 30 plus years. We're family owned and operated. We won the Pinnacle Award from the BBB. Ugh. Everyone's done that. I mean, really. I mean, okay.
We provide great service. Yeah.
We provide great service. Click here to see our reviews from Mrs. Smith and Mr. Jones. Everyone's competing for that. This is such a no-brainer. So when I talk to home service professionals, and you notice I call them home service professionals and not providers, because I want to work with professionals. I mean, like you, Alan, I want to work with a professional, and I am kind of choosy. I want to work because you'll be working with me directly. So I want to work with professionals. And so when you think about it, home service professional, think about how you can stand apart if on your website you are answering frequently asked questions and they can see you. So they get to know the owner of the company, the culture. And what ends up happening, for better or for worse, is they'll book an appointment. And let's say Alan is the owner of the plumbing company. Okay, we'll use you as an example. And they hear Alan and I on the podcast 4, 5, 6 times for different things that we're talking about. We're talking about water heaters. We're talking about PEX. We're talking about all kinds of different things because people want to know that stuff. When they contact Alan's company for the appointment, they expect Alan to come out because they know him. They know him. People buy from people they know, like, and trust. So what happens is they say, Alan would love to come out today, but he can't. But we're going to send Jesse, and Jesse's our best technician or whatever. But think about this. People begin to believe in you. They begin to consume you because they know you. When I do live events, when I go to like a home and garden show, because I've been doing radio forever in Houston. So if I go to a local Houston home and garden show, people come up to me, they're like, hey, Joe, how you doing? And I'm looking at them like, who are you? Of course, because it's a one-way street, right? I'm broadcasting, they're consuming, they've known me for years, but I don't know who they are. And trust me, if I say buy this, they will, because they follow me. And when you think about it, it's a no-brainer.
Love it. Love everything you're about. And congratulations on all your successes, Jim. And this is, as you said, when we first kicked off, that you're extremely busy at the moment. And this is a definitely growing area. And I'm excited about where not only our podcast is going, but where your business is going as well. So I always finish off this podcast with a book recommendation. Now, I'm sure that there is something that you might like to provide to our listeners, my listeners. What's a really good book that you're getting into at the moment that you'd like to recommend?
I just finished a book. So I recommended 3 books. And by the way, I'll talk about them just quickly again. You've got to read or listen to They Ask You Answer by Marcus Sheridan. When you do, you are definitely going to call me. I'm telling you. And a buddy of mine, Tom Decker, wrote When Can You Do It? It is great for home service providers. All these books are available on Amazon, of course. My book, The Radio Pitchman, you can get that for free. This weekend, I listened to an Audible book while I was doing some work on the ranch. I do take some time off. So, 4 hours out on the ranch, may as well listen to something. And I read this book years ago. It's called Built to Sell. Have you ever read the book?
Yes,
you know what it's about? Okay.
Yes.
This is great for the home service professional who's been doing what they're doing for 20 years. And they're like, how can I exit my business? How can I get out? It's all about me. Well, the book talks about how you become less and less important in your business so you can transfer the business to another entity that will hopefully pay you millions of dollars for it. And I surround myself with a lot of people who have done this type of thing, either sold out completely or had partners come in, like equity companies. And it can change your life. And so many people start a business at 30. By the time they're 60, 30 years later, their back is aching. They're done, but they haven't built something they can transfer. So when Frank's Plumbing is 60 years old, or Frank is, the company's 30 years old, and he's doing everything, and his wife's answering the phone, and maybe he has a part-time tech helping him, what happens when he retires? You know the answer, Alan. What happens when he retires? The business retires.
Yep.
There's nothing to sell but a list of customers. Maybe.
Yep.
So anyway, Built to Sell. It's great.
What's the author?
Oh, the author is John Warrillow, Warrillo.
Yeah.
John Warrillow, Built to Sell.
Yeah, there is a few books around, and I know we've got there's fellow contractors in this market that have done similar books. My mind's gone a blank with that. But I just want to also throw a book back at you that I've been reading. I've read it a couple of times, and I'm now really getting into it. It's called The 12-Week Year, and it's based on the similar principle to the whole EOS, which is there's a couple of books have been recommended. I think it was on one of the earlier podcasts. It was with Tom Peregrino, Service Nation. He recommended Rocket Fuel and the EOS book, Traction. Okay. So the 12-Week Year is one that I highly recommend, and it's along the same principles. Brilliant book. So, but thank you, Jim. Appreciate your time today. And as I said, I wish you all the best with your podcasting. Really loving working with you. And thank you for joining me. And thanks for everyone for tuning in to Pipeline to Profitability. And you all have a great day. And thank you again, Jim.
Alan, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. My pleasure. Cheers. See ya.